Seems like a son's wife is just an outsider, huh? No need to waste fancy coffee on a stranger like you. We'll enjoy it ourselves. With that, MIL grinned wickedly. Well, if that's how it's going to be, so be it. This is a game. A doubles game between MIL Elizabeth and SIL Felicia versus me and my husband. Strategy is key in a game. Just you watch. So, I cheerfully responded, gladly, with a big smile. My name is Diana. A 32-year-old working mother. Married to Elliot for 5 years. The day to build our own house has finally arrived. Building a house has been our goal since the beginning of our marriage. We visited various houses, took our time deciding, and diligently saved up. When our child was born 2 years into the marriage, our plans hit a snag. But Elliot and I persevered, and finally, we reached our savings goal. However, actually building the house was harder than imagined. A house is a big purchase. You can't just buy another if something goes wrong. We considered factors like transportation convenience, shopping accessibility, a child-friendly environment, and the reputation of local schools. And whether it was an easy commute for Elliot, a full-time employee. So many things to consider, even just finding the right location was tough. We eventually settled near the in-laws' house. It wasn't out of preference, but because the location was good. It wasn't about living together, but about bearing with minor annoyances. Once the land was decided, it was time to order the house. This was another challenge. Building our ideal home, with budget at the forefront, was full of issues. We progressed, step by step. But complicating matters further were Elizabeth and Felicia. For some reason, they kept interfering. When we mentioned building a house, both suddenly became interested. Elizabeth's eyes sparkled, and Felicia, in her late 20s and single, was excited. Where will it be built? Which home builder are you using? What will the interior look like? They asked all sorts of questions. I tried to brush them off. But then they somehow found out about our meetings with the home builder and the architect and started crashing them. How do they even find these things out? Sorry, it was me who talked. Elliot apologized. So you're the culprit? Even glaring at him, it was too late. If the kitchen storage is too little, Elizabeth would say, having a wooden deck is essential. Felicia would add, somebody, please sew these two's mouths shut. If you're doing barbecues in the garden, a big sink would be useful. A walk-in closet should be bigger, too. The windows should definitely be double-glazed for soundproofing. We'll need a bedroom for Mom and Dad, right? Shouldn't there be a room for Felicia to stay in too? One after another. Wait, hold on. Why do we need a bedroom for the parents-in-law? And what's this about a room for Felicia? Ignoring Elliot and me, Elizabeth and Felicia, with almost a smirk, keep butting in, making the architect give a wry smile. After they left, I had to confirm with Elliot. I hoped not, but I had this bad feeling. Hey, we're not planning to live together, right? From their manner of speaking, I couldn't shake the feeling they were plotting just that. I hesitantly asked Elliot, who shook his head in a hurry. No way! Dad wouldn't think of leaving the house he's used to. And Felicia's old enough, even if our parents' house was gone, there's no way she'd move in with us. That's what I thought. Elliot denied it, but my anxiety didn't disappear. Somehow ignoring Elizabeth and Felicia's interference, we decided on the design and started construction. And a year later, our dream house was finally completed. It was tough, long, and oh so annoying. Lying on the living room sofa after moving in, I closed my eyes and recalled all the hardships. It was educational and fun looking at various properties. Hey Mom, is it okay to put my cup here? Why not? Let's use this corner of the cupboard for mine and Felicia's things. There were times, pointed out by the architect, when I felt disheartened by the difference between the ideal and the reality. The best room on the second floor has to be sunny, right? I'll take the biggest one? Yeah, I'm getting old. A small room would be tiring. Let's go with that. I really wanted to plant a viburnum in the garden. But who knew I'd have to research the type of soil, too. Okay, then I'll call the moving company. Thanks. You're reliable, Felicia. And then there's, wait, what's with these people swarming my house? Elizabeth and Felicia. Why are you meddling with things inside the house? We're just moving things to make it more livable. Felicia replied nonchalantly to my question. My clothes, still in boxes, were pushed to a corner, and somehow Felicia's clothes were making their way into the closet. Elizabeth too. This new house is nice. It's exciting, said, making herself coffee and starting to eat cookies. No, crumbs on the floor. Hey, both of you, stop doing whatever you please. This is our house, you know. I shouted, panicked, as the two behaved as if they were the ones who would be living here. But at that moment, the atmosphere changed. What are you talking about? Felicia said. Huh? As I tilted my head in confusion, Felicia pointed and continued. This house was built by my brother Elliot. Elizabeth nodded in agreement. That's right. It's my son Elliot's house. What's wrong with parents or siblings living here? There's plenty wrong with it. The worry I had since before the house was built seemed to be turning into reality. Could it be these two? Then that settles it. Felicia and I will take the big room on the second floor. The room next to it will be Elliot's, no problem, right? There's a big problem. The big room is for me and my husband, and the next room is for our son. What are you talking about? Elliot and the grandson can just share. What Elizabeth said made no sense. No, it's too small for Elliot, me, and our son. Elliot and the grandson can manage. I'm here too, you know. What are you talking about? That's when Elizabeth looked at me with a sinister smile. Listen here. This house was built by Elliot, who's related by blood. That means it's the right of his blood relatives to live here. You're just an outsider, a stranger. You should just sleep on that sofa over there, she said, pointing to the sofa. You're kidding, right? Elizabeth and Felicia seem serious about living in this house. My precious home is about to be occupied by this alien mother-daughter duo. Worried, I consulted Elliot that night. Luckily, they hadn't stayed over yet, but since they were talking about movers, they might seriously start living here soon. Hey, are you really going to give them the biggest room? No way. Of course not. When I told Elliot about today, he frowned. But they're talking about turning our room into Elizabeth and Felicia's room? That's a bit much. Elliot, looking troubled, tilted his head and talked with Elizabeth and Felicia the next day. And I thought they understood. What, Elizabeth? What are you doing? We're moving in. They didn't get it at all. During the day, when our son was at daycare and Elliot was at work, Elizabeth arrived with movers and started bringing in boxes. Moving in! Really, such an inflexible daughter-in-law. Why should we have to settle for a small room? That's practically ungrateful. After all, a son's wife is just a stranger. Didn't Elliot tell you anything? He did. No to the big room. What a narrowed-down version of the story. Living in this house at all is the problem. I was stunned as they moved everything in. The space intended for our son's room was now occupied by heaps of cardboard boxes, and then Felicia arrived. Oh no, it's a small room. Felicia! What on earth? Hi, Diana, let's get along from now on. Since it's the joyous first day of moving in, let's have a luxurious dinner, okay? No. Ignoring me, Elizabeth and Felicia disappeared into their room and closed the door. Oh, great. Due to Elizabeth and Felicia's surprise invasion, our new home was now occupied by the enemy. Suddenly, I was living with the occupying force. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, all my responsibility, which I wasn't happy about. And them using our stuff without permission was upsetting. But I couldn't really tell them not to use things since we were living together. As I was thinking this, Felicia took out a bottle of wine. That was something I bought for myself, but before I could say anything, she drank it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Elizabeth generously using my expensive lotion. That's expensive stuff. I ordered various things for the luxurious dinner, and of course, I had to pay. Elizabeth and Felicia ate all the delivered dinner. I didn't get a single bite. Elizabeth and Felicia always took showers before me, my husband, and our son. And they always left the hot water running. They never contributed to the utility bills. And they watched TV late into the night at high volume. The house was a mess, dirty everywhere. I'm always positive. Gradually, the absurdity became amusing. I decided to enjoy it. This was a hospitality game with Elizabeth and Felicia. Getting angry is bad for the skin, after all. So, let the hospitality game begin. One holiday. During a day off when Elliot and our son were home, Felicia woke up scratching her head and sat at the dining table. And she asked me, I'm so sleepy. Didn't get enough sleep. Is there coffee? Still sleepy after sleeping till noon. Then Elizabeth woke up. And similarly, Diana, make some coffee, she said, so I stood up. This is a game, a game. I win if I impress them. With that thought, I opened the cabinet with the coffee. Let's see, there should be the instant coffee I bought yesterday. It was a bit more expensive than usual. I showed it with a smug face, but they both looked disappointed. Don't they like it? Then Felicia stood up and started searching the cabinet. And found it, she said, taking out coffee beans. Those are from a gift Elliot got from his boss. It's not just any coffee, it's premium. We don't drink coffee from beans at home, so it was kind of wasted on us. Misunderstanding my expression, Felicia smirked. What, hiding such good beans, Diana? You're so mean. Eh? Elizabeth nodded at Felicia's words. Really? You don't want us, who are not blood-related, to drink delicious coffee. You're definitely an outsider. Such an outsider doesn't deserve this luxury coffee. What? We'll drink this gifted premium coffee. An outsider like you is fine with instant coffee, LOL. And Elizabeth laughed. This is not making any sense. But there's no interpreter. For me, it's actually a relief that they're using up the bean coffee. Seeing Elliot nodding in agreement. Sure, I'd be glad to, I said with a smile. She probably didn't expect that kind of response. What? Elizabeth looked surprised. Ignoring that, I took the coffee beans from Felicia. All right, I'll make some delicious coffee now. Okay then. Felicia seemed puzzled by my smile. There I was, rolling up my sleeves, ready to go. let the game begin, making delicious coffee. But when I opened the bag and saw the beans, I was a bit stumped. I called Elliot, who was looking worried, for a consultation. He came over as I gestured.
What's up? Hey! How do you use coffee beans?
I've never made coffee from beans before. I asked Elliot, but I don't know either. He replied. Now we're in trouble. Our game of making the best coffee has hit a snag right from the start. Should we look it up online? No, that's the last resort. What to do then? Just have to wring out whatever little knowledge we have.
I think you have to grind them into a powder,
said Elliot. Okay, that makes sense.
But we don't have a mill or a blender. What about a mortar?
It got lost during the move. After some thought,
maybe it's fine just to use the beans as they are?
I strongly agreed with Elliot's suggestion. So, let's give it a try. Beans as they are, into the coffee maker's filter. Okay, pour hot water over this.
Look, Diana, it's getting color. Really? So it's a success.
The color is super light, but surely that's what premium coffee looks like. Encouraged, we continued pouring hot water.
It's done. We've made premium coffee.
We proudly presented it to Elizabeth and Felicia. Elizabeth and Felicia sighed deeply at us.
Finally done? How long did it take you to? Seriously. Because of a stranger son's wife, time is wasted. It's so light.
Elizabeth smirked as she criticized me, then screamed when she saw the coffee.
What? It's so light. Is this tea?
Felicia frowned at the coffee too. We, the couple, shook our heads in disbelief.
Genuine premium coffee, extracted from high-quality beans. It's probably light in color because it's high class. We have milk and sugar if you need, but you should try it straight first.
With a musical note, I cheerfully pushed the cups towards them.
But... Please, go ahead. Elliot, is this really premium coffee? Yeah, the finest kind Diana and I made. Try it.
After being cheerfully encouraged by both of us, they reluctantly tasted the coffee. Immediately after.
So weak. Disgusting.
Elizabeth and Felicia both exclaimed.
What is this? This is not coffee. What is this? It's definitely weird. Diana, how did you make this coffee?
I just poured hot water over the beans.
What?
Was something wrong? I looked at Elliot, but he just shrugged. Weird, I just made it normally.
Too high class for your taste? Huh? I am a woman who suits high class stuff. It's this coffee that's odd. Ah, good. Then please drink it all. No, but I mean... Here you go.
If high-end stuff suits them, they'll surely get used to it while drinking. So, there's only one thing to do. I pushed the coffee cup to Felicia's mouth and made her drink forcefully. Meanwhile, Elliot, calling it filial piety, was encouraging Elizabeth to drink. Now, this is getting fun. The daily game is enjoyable.
Elizabeth, shall we clean your room? Hey, at least knock first. Sorry. Since you always enter our room without knocking, I thought it wasn't necessary. Felicia, all this stuff on the floor is trash, right? I'll throw it all away. That's a premium bag. Elizabeth, since you said the seasoning was too light yesterday, I made it stronger today. Too strong. Not just strong, it's spicy.
Felicia, it seems you like my lotion, but I have something better. It has a unique smell, but it's good for your skin.
Smelly. What is this? Don't put it on my face.
The game of pleasing them was getting more and more fun. I continued to serve them with increasing enthusiasm. They cried with joy, so I win. Elliot was also doing various things, but as I spend more time with them, I have the advantage. Then one day, Elizabeth and Felicia disappeared. Huh? Then I received a call from Fael. Oh right, Freddie from the in-laws' house. How has he been? Enjoying a carefree solo life? That's good. According to Freddie, Elizabeth and Felicia came back crying. What happened? Elizabeth's lips are swollen, and Felicia's skin is shiny but smells terrible, he said. They must have been so happy they went to report to Freddie. But they shouldn't think it's over yet. There's a barbecue in the garden tonight. I'm setting up a trampoline for Elizabeth and Felicia to enjoy, so I'll go pick them up now, I announced and went to fetch them from the in-laws' house. For some reason, they ran away, and a chase began. Eventually, I easily caught elderly Elizabeth and Felicia, who boasted about knowing all the hiding spots since childhood, was found by Elliot. Stop it! Stop it, please! They cried with joy, no need to be shy. A few days later, movers suddenly arrived and took Elizabeth and Felicia's stuff away. Why? I wanted to show more hospitality, I said to them hiding behind Freddie at the in-laws' house, and they shook their heads vigorously with pale faces. Elliot looked genuinely disappointed. Hey Elliot, seems like our hospitality wasn't enough for Elizabeth and them. Is that so? Maybe we need to study more. Hearing this conversation, Elizabeth and Felicia began to tremble. After that, Elizabeth and Felicia stopped coming to our house. Even when I greet them in the neighborhood. Hello. They run away immediately. Well, it's fine. Peaceful days returned. We remodeled their room into our son's room, and were even talking about having another child. Feeling a bit unfulfilled now the game is over, unnoticed Freddie stood beside me. The real ditzy ones never realize they're ditzy, do they? And muttered. My name is Kate. I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. In this day and age, some might think being a homemaker is enviable. But I'm not the kind of homemaker who lives in luxury on my husband's earnings. Ben, should I help you wipe down? I'm sorry. Ben, who's in his mid-60s, had a stroke a decade ago when he was still full of energy. Since then, he's been bedridden. All this time, I've been caring for him. We used to worry about not being able to have children when we were younger. But now I see it as a blessing that allows me to devote myself to caregiving. Life is strange, isn't it? Ben's body doesn't move as he wishes, but his mind is clear. Maybe that's why. He always seems to feel sorry towards me. But I wish he wouldn't. I don't find this life too burdensome. Sure, caregiving support services have increased compared to the past, and it's not like I can't take a break at all. But I started caregiving in my 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. I can't deny that my physical strength isn't what it used to be. So, naturally, I wish for some support. From my husband. Could you give me a hand? And then, I'm busy right now. Tom, my husband said. I might understand if he were actually working. But how is lying on the sofa and fiddling with his mobile phone busy? If you're just looking at your phone, help out. It's your dad, after all. I'm supporting by working, aren't I? Let me rest at least on my days off. Saying that, my husband frowned irritably and stood up to leave the room. It's always the same. He doesn't lift a finger. Even if he can't help with caregiving, it would be nice if he at least took care of himself. My husband, hand on the door, turned back and said, Oh yeah, I have a business trip for the next 3 days. Get everything ready. Again? Can't you at least? I'm busy. You should do that much as a wife. Shouting, my husband left the room. Does preparing himself challenge his pride? We're supposed to support each other as a married couple. How did it come to this? No choice. I'll get some help after the helper comes. I sighed and kept staring at the door through which my husband had left. Is that boy off on a business trip again? The night my husband left for his trip, as I was drinking coffee, Linda showed up. Linda, who can't get by without her cane due to mobility issues, is otherwise sharp. While Ben was sleeping, I took a break and helped Linda sit down by taking her hand and guiding her to a chair. After taking a sip of the freshly brewed coffee and exhaling, Linda said with a hint of sadness, "He's always away on business trips several times a month. I wonder if that's really the case." Well, who knows? Linda and I are probably thinking the same thing. Harboring the same suspicions. Infidelity. That word flickers through my mind. But I deliberately don't voice it. What difference does it make if I find out about my husband's infidelity? He'll surely deny it, and gathering evidence would cost money and effort. But I don't have the luxury to deal with that right now. My affection for my husband is almost non-existent. And naturally, his affection towards me is the same. But having lost my own parents early, my in-laws are as precious to me as my own. I can't abandon them. After all, my husband does contribute financially to the household, so maybe it's better to leave his issues be. After a long life of caregiving, I've given up. It wasn't always like this. My husband used to be kind to me when we were distressed about not being able to have children. He used to be dutiful to his parents. But as soon as the caregiving for his parents began, he changed as if he were a different person. Acting on his own whims, almost as if he was single. He started leaving home frequently, claiming he was on business trips. He grew colder, not just towards his parents, but towards me as well. "You're such an unattractive woman. Eating with you ruins my appetite." After being bluntly told that, we started eating separately. Now, my husband eats alone, while I feed Ben and share meals with Linda. "I don't want to sleep in the same room." Since he said that, I've been sleeping on the living room sofa. But the kind and grateful words from my caring in-laws somehow kept me going. Just when I was feeling the distance from my husband, another troubling issue arose. The money my husband was bringing home decreased. Despite discussing various problems, he stubbornly insisted his salary had decreased. But I knew he was lying. I happened to see his pay stub. To my surprise, his salary had actually increased. I wondered if he had received a promotion, but that wasn't the important part. The problem was that he was lying and reducing the money for the household. "That's quite a sum for your parents' taxi, fares to the hospital, and hiring helpers. Our living expenses are..." What? Managing with the money provided is a homemaker's duty. If you can't do that, you're failing as a homemaker. If you can't even manage that, what value do you have? No matter how much I pleaded, my husband wouldn't listen. Seeing this, my in-laws seemed apologetically again. They even offered their meager pensions to help with the living expenses. Feeling sorry, I struggled to make ends meet with the money my husband gave. As a result, our meals became vegetable-centered and modest. My in-laws claimed to prefer such meals, but my husband would say, "How can I eat such plain food?" And he started dining out every night. Consequently, the money he brought home decreased even more. A vicious cycle that also lessened his time at home. And in proportion, my spirit dwindled away. On that particular day, Ben's condition suddenly worsened. A stroke had recurred. In no time at all, Ben passed away. Initially, I was stunned, but then tears wouldn't stop flowing. Linda and I hugged and cried in front of Ben, who looked as if he were merely sleeping. At that time, my husband was, yet again, on a business trip. When I finally calmed down a bit and called him.
Hello? Who's this?
A woman answered the phone, to my shock. My husband was in the midst of an affair.
Hey, don't just pick up like that.
I heard my husband's voice, sounding flustered as he snatched the phone away. Normally, I'd be seething with anger in such a situation. But having just lost Ben, my heart felt numb, and I was surprisingly calm. Without confronting him about the affair, I simply informed him that Ben had passed away.
Oh, really?
His response was disconcertingly brief. Can someone be this indifferent about their own father's death? To me, my husband seemed as alien as a being from another planet. No, that's an insult to aliens. Even in space, I believe there's some sense of parent-child bond. Throughout the funeral, my husband maintained a detached demeanor, merely going through the motions of being the chief mourner. Relatives consoled the grieving Linda. Meanwhile, the actual son seemed to spend most of the time fiddling with his mobile phone and yawning. Everyone looked at my husband with disdain. Because of him, Ben's funeral, whom I dearly loved, became a dismal affair. A month passed since then. Between dealing with the aftermath of Ben's death and caring for Linda's mental health, time flew by. My husband was in an exceptionally good mood today. Because today was the day Ben's will was to be disclosed. Ben had prepared a notarized will, which doesn't require court verification. It was kept in the lawyer's office. Today, Linda was to bring it from the office and open it. Normally, one would assume the inheritors to be Linda, the wife, and my husband, the only son. I wondered if there was really a need for a will. Could there be a secret child? With bated breath, I watched the proceedings, reminding myself that as a DIL, I had no rights to the inheritance. The lawyer, called in for this day, along with relatives of both in-laws, were present as witnesses. As everyone watched, the lawyer opened and read the will. That was, Linda was to inherit the house and land, and half of all other assets. That was expected. But what followed was shocking. The remaining half wasn't left to my husband, the son.
What? Kate and I are to inherit the remaining half equally?
My husband stood up, shouting in disbelief. Indeed. The will unexpectedly left part of the inheritance to me. Stunned, I watched as my husband pointed at me and yelled furiously.
Why does my wife have to take the inheritance? I'm the real son. Everything, apart from Mom's share, should obviously come to me. But the will states, I don't care. It's invalid. Invalid.
My husband screamed at the lawyer. I was speechless, shocked by the sudden turn of events. But what my husband said next left me completely astounded.
I was the one who mostly took care of Dad. She didn't do much. What?
What is this man saying? I already knew he was a liar, but this lie was too much. He took care of Ben mostly? Who could say such a thing? I couldn't stay silent anymore and was about to speak when.
What are you talking about? Have some shame, you foolish son.
The shout didn't come from me. Unexpectedly, it was Linda. A dramatic soundtrack seemed to play as Linda's face filled the screen. Or at least, that's how it felt. Then, a close-up of my husband's shocked face. Silence fell over the room. Linda, usually so quiet and never raising her voice, had taken us all by surprise. My husband, stunned by her uncharacteristic fierceness, was speechless. In the midst of this,
Linda continued. Mostly took care of Ben, you say? Which mouth of yours is saying that? You do nothing but play with your phone or watch TV every day. You don't even eat at home. You barely contribute any money to the household. And to top it off, you lie about business trips to cheat. You really don't deserve a cent of the inheritance. What? Is that true? Reacting to Linda's words were Ben's brothers. Strong-looking men due to their construction business. Confronted by these imposing figures, my husband seemed even smaller. Eh? What do you mean? Mom, I might not have been home much, but the affair accusation is just baseless. Don't make random claims without any evidence. My husband was stuttering and sweating in panic. Without missing a beat, Linda produced a large envelope. Where did that come from? Did she have it hidden? I hadn't noticed it at all. Do you know what this is? It's filled with evidence of your affairs. I didn't think Kate, who worked so hard taking care of Ben, would have the means. So Ben and I hired a detective. Be prepared. With that, Linda scattered the contents of the envelope. Ah! After my husband's scream, the relatives reacted. What is this? Ugh, that's disgusting. Really, my eyes feel dirty now. The reaction from the relatives was one of disappointment. The contents were numerous embarrassing photos of my husband and his mistress. What are they even doing outdoors? I didn't know my husband had such hobbies. Never thought I'd discover such hidden sides of my husband after 20 years of marriage. Like the relatives, I was appalled. Shame on you! Doing such disgraceful things. Claiming you took care of Ben, saying Kate did nothing. Insisting the inheritance is all yours, how dare you say such things? You shameless, unfilial son. Apologize to Kate. It's not like that, this is wrong. It's not wrong, you foolish son. Linda, calm down, please. You'll burst a blood vessel. It's too early to follow Ben. Perhaps it was Linda's towering rage that allowed me, the one who should be most upset, to remain calm. Linda, please calm down. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. That foolish son. After some deep breathing, Linda calmed down a bit. But her anger was far from subsiding. Seeing her like this made me start to laugh. Kate? Surprised, Linda looked at me as I suddenly burst into laughter. I smiled at Linda and then hugged her. Thank you so much, Linda. Kate? For getting angry on my behalf, for conducting such an investigation for me. I really appreciate it. Of course. You are my precious daughter, after all. Daughter. I never realized how happy being called that could make me. Since Ben's passing, I've become quite teary, and once again, tears welled up. But I can't spend all my time crying. After stepping away from Linda, I wiped away my tears roughly and looked at my husband. You. What? Let's get a divorce. Fine by me, I'll gladly do it. I desperately suppressed another wave of laughter and then confirmed with my husband. So, about the will, about the inheritance? All right, I accept Dad's will. I looked at the lawyer, who slowly nodded. The lawyer was designated as the executor of the will. I was sure he would handle the following procedures smoothly. Taking a moment to breathe, I then moved on to another matter. Shall we begin? My statement was met with nods from Linda and the attending relatives. My husband was the only one who didn't understand. What more is there to discuss? To my clueless husband, I said with a smile. It's obvious, isn't it? The compensation claim for your affair. What? Why did he think it would all end here? With evidence of his infidelity right in front of us, it wasn't going to be just a divorce and goodbye.
Don't joke. Compensation on top of the inheritance. What a greedy woman you are. Coming from someone who pushed the care of his parents onto his wife and had affairs.
Really, the nerve. Don't joke is my line.
We have a lawyer here, and plenty of witnesses, so why don't we have a thorough discussion? I just remembered something I have to do. What could be more important than what we're doing now? Don't run away, you fool.
Before I could grab his hand, someone else grabbed my husband by the neck. It was Ben's brother, hardened by his construction work. Behind him stood Ben's equally formidable brother. They nodded in agreement. Muscles really do have an impact. After that, under the watchful eyes of the Muscle brothers, other relatives, and Linda, my husband couldn't flee. He had no choice but to stay and discuss until everything was settled.
Today's another beautiful day.
Looking up, the sky was cloudless and clear. Half a year had passed since then. Thanks to the lawyer, the inheritance proceedings went very smoothly. The divorce was finalized, and I was enjoying living alone. I really wanted to live with Linda, but now that we were strangers due to the divorce, Linda stubbornly refused, not wanting to make me her caregiver again. As a result, Linda moved into a nursing home with the money from selling the house. I visit her once a week. It seems like a wonderful place, and Linda seems happy. In the end, I feel like this was the best outcome. The house was sold. That means, essentially, the house was gone. As for my ex-husband, who was practically kicked out, well, according to the will, he received his share of the inheritance. He was overjoyed at first, but then his face turned pale. Why? Because the inheritance had almost vanished. The reason goes without saying. Compensation, of course. My husband's inheritance was gone. Not enough from the inheritance alone, so he also had to pay from his savings. As a result, my husband ended up penniless. And more than that, it seems his affair became known at his company. Particularly among the female staff, he was given the cold shoulder and became quite isolated, leading to a series of mistakes, it seems.
That woman, she's my boss, but didn't defend me properly,
he was saying over the phone. And it turns out that this boss was a woman and, astonishingly, the mistress was his boss. Maybe that explains the mysterious salary raise. But as soon as the affair came to light, he was dumped by the mistress, who also faced a demotion due to the affair and other ethics violations. I made sure she paid compensation too. That's only right.
It's your fault I kept making mistakes and got fired.
He tried to blame it all on me. But that's not my problem, is it?
You got used to caring for Ben, so looking after me should be easy for you,
he said, but no, that's entirely different. I couldn't respond with anything but laughter. So, I blocked his calls. I don't know what became of my husband after that. And I don't want to know. To forget about that foolish husband, I started working, and it turned out to be refreshing and enjoyable. The world is so much broader than I thought. A sense of excitement for a bright future welled up in me unknowingly. Gazing up at the contrails stretching straight across the blue sky, I squinted my eyes.
Our son is going to live with you, Mom. Even if he's sick, being with your grandchild every day is a blessing, right?
The voice of my son on the phone dripped with malice, as if mocking me. I hugged my grandson tightly, covering his ears so he wouldn't hear that voice. My grandson, who just turned 7, was recently taken to the hospital. There, he was diagnosed with a certain illness, and my son and his wife left him at my house. Coming home from work, I found my grandson sitting dejectedly at the entrance. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. He told me himself,
I was abandoned by mom and dad because I'm sick. I wish they could understand how I felt. I immediately called my son. What followed was a brazen declaration of abandonment. My daughter-in-law, likely beside my son, let out a vulgar laugh, saying, "We don't want to catch his illness. Let the short-lived elderly take care of him." She hurled insults worse than my son's and cut off the call with a harsh laugh. The phone, abruptly disconnected, never connected again. Looking at my trembling grandson in my arms, I made up my mind. I will raise him. First of all, my name is Frida. I'm 57 and a company employee. I married my husband at 22 and gave birth to our son, Morty, the following year. My husband adored Morty, and the three of us lived happily together.
He's so adorable. I'm so happy such a cute child was born to us,
my husband would say, holding Morty and beaming with joy. But that happiness didn't last long. When Morty was 2, my husband suddenly fell ill and passed away. I was heartbroken, but I had no time to grieve. I had to raise Morty alone. From then on, I worked tirelessly, raising Morty as a single mother. I never remarried. Luckily, I had been a full-time employee since before marriage, so I managed to raise Morty without financial struggles. Now Morty is 34. He works as a company employee in a general business, but Morty has always been somewhat flighty and easily influenced. He got his current job because a college senior suggested it, and he just went along with it. When Morty was 26, he married a woman his age named Maya. Maya was very strong-willed, and I never had a good impression of her even during their dating days. For instance, Maya would frequently visit our house but never once said hello or goodbye. I gently brought this up to Maya at one point. "Maya, it's great you come to visit, but I'd appreciate it if you'd say hello when you arrive." Maya reacted defiantly, visibly annoyed. "What? You don't have the right to tell me what to do. I'm a guest here. I'm doing you a favor by visiting. It's really unpleasant to be told such arbitrary things." I was stunned by her brash response. Morty, on his part, would say things like, "Mom, don't be so stiff." I thought it was common sense to greet when visiting someone's home, but it seemed not to apply to Maya. Morty appeared completely under the thumb of the assertive Maya. After Maya left, I reiterated my point to Morty, but just let it go. He just brushed it off. Incidents like these often happened, so I didn't have a good impression of Maya. Of course, I repeatedly told Morty to be more responsible. The couple rented an apartment after their marriage and started living near our house. The following year, they had their first son, Darren. My first grandchild. Children grow up so fast, and in no time, Darren turned 7. One day, as I was returning from work and my house came into view, I noticed someone sitting at the entrance. Who could that be? As I got closer, I realized it was Darren. Having been busy with work recently and not seeing my son's family or Darren, I was both surprised and overjoyed to see him after so long.
"Darren, it's been a while. What are you doing here?"
When I called out to him, Darren slowly lifted his face to meet my eyes. "Grandma." Seeing Darren's face after such a long time, I was lost for words. His face had white, patchy areas, and his eyes were swollen red as if he had been crying. I tried to remain as calm as possible and invited Darren inside. "And? Darren, what happened? Can you tell Grandma about it?" I gently asked him. He nodded slowly and began to speak in bits and pieces. "Well, I got a skin disease. I forgot its name because it was complicated, but it's a rare disease." Seeing young Darren's lips quiver and his face turn pale, my heart ached. "A rare disease. Is that really what you were told?" "Yes, Mom and Dad said that. Ever since I got this disease, they stopped looking at my face. And today, they brought me here to Grandma's house and told me to wait for you, and then they went away." Shocked by Darren's story, I hurriedly called Morty.
To prevent Darren from hearing the conversation, I asked him to stay in the living room and drink juice while I moved to another room.
Morty! I heard from Darren. How could you leave him at our doorstep without telling me anything?
Mom, you're back. Yeah, Darren has this rare disease called pityriasis simplex. It's really troublesome. Pityriasis simplex. I remembered hearing that name before. I had seen a feature on it on TV once. Wasn't it just white spots? White spots are common in children and not a rare disease.
Is it really a rare disease?
The dermatologist said it's pityriasis simplex.
It's a complicated name, so it must be rare, right?
So, since we could catch it too, Maya suggested you should raise him, and I agreed.
So, Mom, please take care of Darren for us.
Thanks.
What? You call yourselves parents? That's so irresponsible.
I shouted in anger at Morty's outrageous statement. Then Maya took over the call, and her shrill voice echoed.
Morty and I are still young and have our lives ahead of us. It would be terrible to catch such a creepy skin disease. So let the short-lived elderly take care of him. Bye.
With that unilateral shout, the call was disconnected. Stunned, I quickly took out a book from the bookshelf that listed various diseases and their treatments and looked up pityriasis simplex. Thank goodness. It's just white spots. He'll be fine. The research confirmed that pityriasis simplex was not a rare disease and, with proper treatment, could be cured in most cases. I felt relieved and simultaneously furious at my selfish son and daughter-in-law. I realized they had abandoned Darren at our house, assuming it was a rare disease from its complicated name. How selfish of them. I will definitely raise Darren well. I muttered with determination and returned to the living room. I smiled at Darren, who looked anxious. Darren, don't worry. Your illness is curable. Let's go to the hospital together tomorrow.
Really?
Darren, thinking it was incurable, lit up. Yes, it's not a rare disease, so don't worry. And Darren, from today, you'll live with Grandma. It's okay. I'll make sure you're happy. Let's live together happily. Darren looked a bit bewildered, but then nodded. Thank you, Grandma. And smiled. Time passed, and 9 years went by. I turned 66, and Darren became 16. During these 9 years, I couldn't make any contact with my son and his wife. Darren, in his teenage years, didn't talk much lately but grew up kind, occasionally cooking meals. Now retired, I support Darren with my pension and retirement funds. Then one day, my son and his wife, who disappeared 9 years ago, suddenly appeared at our home. What do you want now, after all this time? I coldly confronted them at the entrance. How dare they show their faces after not contacting us for 9 years? Hey, we saw you on TV the other day. Surprised us. Darren is amazing. Earning so much money at his age, huh? Apparently, they had seen a recent TV interview, Teenage Genius Inventor. Maya, standing next to Morty, also chimed in with a sneer. Getting a patent and all, that's really amazing. You must be so rich now, huh? Indeed, Darren was skilled at inventing, and he had recently obtained a patent. It was clear from their attitude that Morty and Maya believed Darren was making money from his patent and had come here today with that in mind. They hadn't expressed any concern for Darren, they only talked about him becoming rich. They're still the worst couple. Then Darren appeared behind me. He must have heard our conversation. Hey Darren. We've come to take you back. A son is a son, even if he suffers from an illness. Let's live together again with your dad and mom. Morty's exaggerated behavior was almost laughable. To this, Darren responded coldly. Huh? Who the heck are you? Darren, now a high school student, was old enough to understand the situation. He realized from the conversation that his parents were after money, and felt no attachment to them, having been abandoned. Morty and Maya seemed taken aback by Darren's indifferent attitude, but quickly regained composure and started talking fluently. Darren is sick, so his life will be tough. That's why Maya and I will support him, Morty declared. What? After you abandoned me, you have the nerve to act all fatherly now? Don't pretend to be a dad. Darren, having listened to them for a while, clicked his tongue in disgust and scoffed. I was also astonished that they still mistakenly thought Darren had a rare disease. Darren's face had completely healed. Morty, Maya, you've been mistaken all along. Darren doesn't have a rare disease. Pityriasis simplex is just white spots, common in children. Darren completely recovered in about a year. Stunned by my explanation, Morty suddenly changed his attitude and shouted, "We've been tricked! Screw you! Why didn't you tell us something so important?" Maya followed suit. "We were kidnapped by an old woman. You've taken our child for 9 years. Give back our child, Frida, you old kidnapper," and cursed at me. Ignoring their rants, Darren quickly took out his mobile phone and called the police. The police are on their way. And just so you know, getting a patent doesn't mean you become rich instantly. You need companies to use the technology, and only then do you get patent fees. It's not some epic-making discovery, nor is it a widely used patent, so it's just a dream to be filthy rich. The money I've received so far has all gone to materials. So, I don't have any money. After Darren explained calmly, Morty and Maya turned red with anger, screaming, "What the hell? Then why did you call us here?" Seeing their reaction, Darren sighed. "I don't know. You came here on your own, so don't get angry at us. Just go home." Seeing Darren laugh, Morty shouted, "Don't you get smart with me!" His fist was clenched, ready to lash out at Darren, so I instinctively jumped forward to intervene. Just as Morty was about to swing at me, a loud male voice rang out. "Stop it!" A police officer was outside the window. He had seen Morty about to hit Darren through the curtain and acted quickly. While his shout startled Morty, another officer quietly entered from the entrance, stepping between us and Morty. Morty waved his open hand, feigning innocence. He then sneered at Darren. "You might be an inventor or whatever, but don't get cocky. Live with that old woman for the rest of your life." With that parting shot, he left. The police asked if we were okay, and we said yes. After explaining the situation, we were advised not to let my son and his wife into our home again, and I nodded in agreement. The police reassured us they would help if needed, leaving me relieved. After the police left, I asked Darren, "Are you okay?" Concerned about his mental state. I knew he must be hurt, even if he acted tough, after being treated that way by his biological parents. However, Darren admitted, "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shocked. I knew my parents were the worst for abandoning me without understanding my illness. But I didn't expect them to be that stupid, thinking I'm rich just because of a patent. All those nice words, thinking I'd agree to live with them." He sighed deeply, clearly displeased, and ruffled his hair. Then he looked down at me, smiling. "But Grandma, why did you try to protect me when I was about to get hit? I'm 16 now, and I'm bigger than you. I don't need protection." He asked me as if he was dumbfounded, which left me dumbfounded. "What are you talking about? No matter how old they get, you want to protect your kids. Their size doesn't matter." Darren groaned softly, then turned away. "I'd hate it more if you got hurt," he said gruffly, heading to his room. It seemed he was worried about me. I felt happy, realizing how kind Darren had grown. After that, I quickly contacted a certain person. A few days later, I went to the house where my son and his wife currently lived, accompanied by a certain person. When I rang the doorbell, Morty opened the door lazily and was shocked to see me and the person beside me. "Lean! Why?" The person next to me was Lean, Morty's friend. Morty's voice startled Maya, who also came from the back. "Lean!" Her face turning pale. Ignoring me, the couple was visibly shaken by Lean's arrival. "Long time no see, Morty, Maya." Lean greeted them, and Morty, looking agitated.
"How did you find this place?"
he asked. I answered his question. "When you came to our house the other day, you mentioned to Darren that you now live in a single-family home in this town." I didn't miss that.
"But how did you find this specific house with just the town's name? We didn't give you any detailed address,"
Morty exclaimed in panic.
"That's true. Knowing just the town's name wouldn't be enough to find your address, so I hired a detective to focus on this town." "A detective?"
"Yes, and it didn't take long for them to find you. Then, I contacted Lean and we decided to come see you together today."
"Using a detective is cheating. That's no different from stalking."
Lean glared at Morty.
"I've got nothing to say to fraudsters. Anyway, Morty, Maya, return the money I lent you."
Lean's stern voice filled the room, causing the couple to tremble. Lean, a friend of Morty's, had lent them money. I only found out about this after my son and his wife had disappeared for some time. Lean came to my house to consult about lending them money and not being able to contact them anymore. He came all the way to visit me, wondering if they might have returned to a parent's house due to financial struggles so bad that they had to run away to avoid paying him back, and asked me to let him know if I ever found out their whereabouts.
You two told Lean that Darren had a rare disease and you were in a tight spot financially, and got $5,000 from him by playing on his sympathy."
My words made my son and his wife look down, trembling.
"It wasn't just Lean, you did the same thing with others, borrowing money here and there. Then, when repayment became difficult, you abandoned Darren at our house and disappeared without paying back anyone, exploiting people's kindness for your own gain. You're the lowest of the low." "No. But we really thought Darren had a rare disease." "Yes, we really did. That's why we borrowed the money."
Frustrated with their excuses, I shouted.
"What are you talking about? Even if you thought so, you never treated Darren's condition. You took him to a dermatologist once and then neglected him, not spending a dime on his treatment. So where's the money you borrowed from your friends? Do you have it with you if you didn't use it for treatment costs? Of course, you don't. You probably squandered it on yourselves. As parents and human beings, you're the absolute worst. Shame on you." "Ugh."
They fell silent.
"The real reason you left Darren at my house wasn't because you were afraid of his disease spreading, it was to evade the debts you owed. Months before abandoning Darren, you frequently went on trips and started wearing only branded items, didn't you?" "No, but it's true that we didn't want to be around Darren because his disease was creepy."
Even at this point, they still tried to justify. And with despicable excuses, too. Sighing deeply.
"Darren is fortunate not to have grown up with parents like you. He might have ended up with a twisted personality because of you. I'm so glad he has grown into a kind and admirable young man,"
I said. My son and his wife made sullen faces, not seeming convinced. Lean said sternly to the two,
"I have a good idea who else you've defrauded, so I'm planning to contact them and start a class action lawsuit. You better be prepared." "A lawsuit? Wait a minute. Isn't that a bit too drastic?"
"Too drastic?"
"Not at all. Unless you can repay right now all the money you borrowed from me and others, which I guess you've already spent, right?"
Lean pressed. My son and his wife were speechless.
"I never imagined being betrayed by a longtime friend like you, Morty. I became distrustful of people for a while after you two disappeared. I will never forgive you,"
Lean said, glaring at them with hatred. I told my son and his wife,
"Don't worry about Darren. He's a high school student now, capable of making his own decisions. Please don't contact him anymore."
I was firm in cutting ties with them. Months later, despite being threatened, Morty and his wife still hadn't repaid the money. They were sued in a class action by the people they owed. Though each person was owed less than $10,000,
the total was overwhelming for them. They ended up selling the house they had bought just a few years prior. But because they had a mortgage, most of the proceeds went to paying that off, and the little that was left went towards the lawsuit settlement. Even though it was their most valuable asset, I couldn't believe they had to sell their house. It turned out they sold the house intending to move back into mine. I learned this sometime after the lawsuit, when I got a phone call from an enraged Morty. "Mom! What the hell? Our house is gone! What's going on?" "What do you mean?" "As the for sale sign says, I sold the house and land." "It's quite obvious, isn't it?" Indeed, I had decided to sell the house and land even before they faced the lawsuit. Real estate agents said that vacant houses are hard to sell, and that it was better to demolish and sell the land. Following their advice, I demolished the house and quickly sold the land due to its good location. The money went towards moving with Darren. Actually, Darren was attending a high school quite far away, and commuting from the old house was quite the journey. So we moved closer to his school for a shorter commute. When I explained this, Morty started shouting. "What? Where are you living now? We have nowhere to live since we sold our house. Tell me your address, we'll live with you." "There's no way I'll tell you. One reason I sold the house and land was to cut ties with you. I won't tell you where we live, and I'm blocking your number, so don't contact us ever again." "No. No way. That's too harsh." Morty was stunned, and behind him, Maya's despairing scream could be heard. "The ones who are truly terrible are you too. You don't seem to be remorseful at all, but you should reflect on your actions and attitudes. The last thing I can say to you as a parent is to learn to introspect and repent. Goodbye," I said and ended the call, setting it to block further communication. My disillusioned son and his wife managed to find an old apartment to live in, but they seemed to be leading a tough life. Afterwards, I consulted with the lawyer hired by Lean and reconsidered my relationship with Darren. Until now, I had raised him as a grandmother. But Morty and his wife's presence was negatively influencing Darren. So, I considered legally becoming his parent through adoption. If it were recognized, I wouldn't have to divide my estate equally between Darren and Morty when I pass away. It would prevent Morty from running off with everything. I decided to check with Darren. "Darren, I want to adopt you. Not just as a grandmother and grandson, but legally as mother and son. What do you think?" "I respect your feelings, of course." After a moment of silence. "Yeah, I want to be your son officially." Darren smiled shyly and said. With Darren's consent, I contacted the family court with the help of a lawyer. Given Morty's terrible behavior, the adoption was relatively easily approved. Likely influenced by Darren being 16 years old. Darren and I successfully completed the adoption process. It was a joyous moment for me, especially knowing that he chose me over his biological parents even when he is still in his adolescence. Darren, talented in inventing, is always trying new things, and I'm living a peaceful life, enjoying watching him grow.
Liddy is just so cute. The voice becomes clear as the door opens, and at that name coming from Quimby's mouth, I froze. I wondered who it could be, but hearing that name confirmed it. The woman's voice was indeed my sister Liddy's. Quimby foolishly kept calling Liddy's name over and over. Shivering, I snapped to my senses. I realized I had to capture this scene on video. So, I firmly recorded the evidence on my smartphone and quietly left the spot. After a while, the two of them came out of the bedroom. Seeing me, they turned pale, and I said, "That's right, I sent the video of you two to Gabriel. Anyway, let's discuss what to do next among the four of us soon." At those words, Liddy's face turned even paler. "What? What do you mean?" "Just what it sounds like. I've got the video as evidence." "What have you done?" As I held up my smartphone, my sister became utterly frantic, and then she lunged at me. "My name is Linny, a 45-year-old housewife. I have twin boys who are in the 6th grade of elementary school. The kids are twins. I've heard that twins run in families, and indeed, I am a twin myself. I have a twin sister named Liddy. Being identical twins, we never really felt like sisters. Rather, we were more like rivals. Even if we weren't twins, it might have been the same, but I grew up always being compared to Liddy. Before long, I harbored a strong complex towards Liddy, and she, in turn, placed utmost importance on surpassing me. Liddy was always the cute and affable child. On the other hand, I was always the shy and reserved one. And because I was also a bit of an introvert, everyone's attention naturally gravitated towards Liddy whenever we met someone new. Even though we were rivals, I deeply adored Liddy. Her ever-smiling face and popularity were something I aspired to. But it seems Liddy didn't feel the same way. We used to play together a lot when we were in elementary school, but I was always stuck with the roles nobody wanted. Liddy is it! When nobody wanted to be it in a game of tag, I was always the one forced into the role. Even when one of our friends suggested deciding by rock, paper, scissors, Liddy would pressure me, saying, "You want to do it, right, Linny?" Not wanting to be disliked by Liddy or left out, I had no choice but to agree. Liddy's manipulative behavior wasn't just limited to playtime. It was in 6th grade. We were deciding roles for a school play. We were going to perform Snow White, and I, not being much of an actress, hoped to be the narrator. But I caught a cold and had to miss school on the day of role assignments. "Liddy wants to be the narrator. I'll tell the teacher for you." Liddy said she'd pass on my wishes, so I trusted her and felt relieved. However, when I returned to school after recovering, I was shocked to find out I had been cast as the lead role. "Why am I the lead?" I asked a friend in disbelief, and then came the unbelievable reply. "Liddy said you wanted to be the lead." "What? I didn't say that." "But it's already been decided." It seems that as we were entering puberty, no one wanted to take on the potentially embarrassing lead role of Snow White. So I, the quiet girl who was absent, was chosen. The teacher found it odd that I, usually so reserved, had expressed a desire to take the lead role. Did Linny really say that? The teacher had even checked with Liddy. "Truly, she wants to, but she's too shy to volunteer. Please, let this be an opportunity for Linny to shine." But Liddy recommended me as if it was all in my best interest. I cried, insisting I couldn't do it, and didn't want to. However, everyone else's roles had already been assigned. Chastised by teachers and parents alike, I somehow managed to pull through. Thanks to that effort, the play was a huge success. Teachers, parents, and friends all praised me. But amidst all this, only Liddy looked on displeased. Anyone could have done that. Getting all that praise for such a little thing is just silly. And so she began to openly resent me. That was the moment I truly felt Liddy's dislike. After that, she stopped inviting me to play. At first, it was painful, but once I realized I was no longer being forced into unpleasant roles, I made other friends and started enjoying myself. In middle school, many didn't even know Liddy and I were twins. We had become so distant, hardly speaking at school, and didn't look alike at all. We requested not to be in the same class, and I was enjoying my own life. But then, one day, as I was studying for high school entrance exams, Liddy approached me. "Studying? Have you decided which high school you're applying to?" "Yeah, thinking of going for A high school." A high school was the newest and closest school to our house, boasting a competitive entrance difficulty. I had been working hard for 3 years because I really wanted to get into that school. But Liddy, unaware of my efforts, laughed when she heard my choice of high school. "A high school? You've got to be kidding, right? Why don't you just go to B high school with me? It sounds like you wouldn't even need to study much for that." Liddy always managed to bend me to her will, but I didn't want her dictating my choice of high school too. For the first time, I stood up to her. "I've decided to go to A high school. You don't know if it's impossible for me. If you don't want to study, that's fine, but don't get in my way." I turned away from her and went back to my textbook. "What? That tone to your older sister? Angered by my response, Liddy grabbed my textbook and threw it on the floor. What are you doing? Even if you study, it's a waste, you know. You're destined to be my slave and go to B high school together. That day, we ended up in a physical fight. Our parents came running when they heard the commotion and pulled us apart. But by then, my textbook was torn to pieces. But more than that, my heart was shattered by hearing Liddy's true feelings about me. To Liddy, I was just a convenient target for all the unpleasant things. Realizing that Liddy saw me as her slave was a clear awakening, but I didn't give up on studying. Fortunately, my parents contacted the school for me, and I got a new textbook. With my parents' support, Liddy no longer interfered with my studies, and I was able to dedicate myself to them and successfully got into my chosen school. As she had initially declared, Liddy barely studied for the exams and went on to B high school. Thus, we went to different high schools, pursued our education at different universities, and eventually started our careers. As an adult, I began living on my own. And that's when I met a man. He was my husband, Quimby. Quimby and I were hired at the same time and felt a closeness because we were from the same area. When he asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming. I actually like you, Linny. I'd be happy if you'd go out with me. Hearing those words made me incredibly happy. I had feelings for Quimby too, but I had never had the courage to admit such feelings openly. I wasn't pretty like Liddy, and having had almost no experience with love during my school days, I could hardly believe he felt the same way about me. I'd be happy to. Thank you. Being in a relationship for the first time made me feel overjoyed. Since we started dating, I've been doing my best to make him happy, cooking meals and preparing lunch boxes for him. Quimby started visiting my apartment more often, and we began a life almost like we were living together. Linny, I'll cook dinner tonight. But it wasn't just me doing things for him. Quimby was also very cooperative with household chores. Doing chores together was fun, and I began to think we could make a good married couple. 3 years into our relationship, we decided to get married. I was overjoyed and very happy about it, but there was one thing that worried me. You're a twin, right? I'd like to meet your sister. Quimby brought it up. During the 3 years we were dating, I had told him that I have a twin sister, but I had never introduced him to Liddy. I hadn't even told her about having a boyfriend. Since that big fight in middle school, there had been a deep rift between us. Yeah, that's right. But if we were getting married, it was inevitable that Liddy and Quimby would meet. The thought of how Liddy might scorn us made me anxious, but I knew I had to introduce them at some point. What? Married? Since when? And when I finally called Liddy, after a long time, she seemed surprised by my news and raised her voice. I had told my parents, but it seems Liddy hadn't heard about it yet. She sounded like this was news to her. Yeah, and I want to introduce Liddy to the man I'm going to marry. I'm busy, you know. Well, if you insist, I guess I could meet him. Liddy was as condescending as ever, so I asked her to make some time for us. Liddy hadn't changed since we were kids. I figured I had to be the adult and humble myself. We went back home to meet Liddy on her day off. Quimby suggested we all have a meal together with our parents, so we arranged to meet at a restaurant. And then, on the day, we went to the restaurant, but even when the time came, Liddy didn't show up. Liddy's late. I thought she'd said she'd be on time. Sorry, Quimby. Don't worry about it. She'll show up eventually. Let's just wait a bit longer. Both my parents and I felt bad for keeping Quimby waiting. 15 minutes past the scheduled time, Liddy showed up in a flashy dress. Sorry, did you wait? We did. What's with the outfit? Well, it's kind of like a meet and greet, right? Thought I should dress up. I couldn't help but be exasperated by her. Not just me, but our parents just gave a wry smile. If she knew it was a meet and greet, I wish she hadn't been late without even messaging. Especially not for the sake of getting dressed up. Seemed immature for an adult. But wanting to keep the peace, I swallowed my words. We introduced Liddy and Quimby to each other. Wow, Linny, you've snagged a good-looking one. Working at the same place means he must be earning well. Liddy made several rude remarks to Quimby on their first meeting. What do you do in your free time? With Linny? No, before you started dating Linny. She grilled Quimby like it was a speed dating session. Despite our parents' attempts to stop her, Liddy kept going, saying, "It's fine, I want to know what kind of man Linny's husband will be." Quimby was gracious, saying, "Don't worry about it," and entertained Liddy throughout. By the end of the meal, I was exhausted and sighing. However, it didn't end there. Liddy's quite the character, huh? Opposite of Linny. I always say we're the least alike twins ever. When I responded with a forced smile, Quimby said, "Maybe you should take a leaf out of Liddy's book. She's always smiling, good at conversation, and cute. If I'd met her first." I was shocked at what he meant. I had told him about my discomfort with Liddy. To hear him say this, knowing that, was deeply shocking. "Why don't you marry Liddy then? She even said you were handsome." When I snapped back like that, he hurriedly apologized. Sorry, it was just a joke. I'm glad I met Linny, and I don't have any special feelings for Liddy." "Then you shouldn't say things that praise Liddy and put me down." "It was a joke." Quimby apologized like that. I was shocked, but I wasn't going to call off our engagement over something like this. I just hoped he understood. Right after that, he said, "But Liddy is a nice girl. It's not good to be jealous of your sister. Let's all get along as a family now. We're adults. Things are different than they were." I had my reservations, but I knew our parents wanted Linny and me to get along, but I wanted Quimby to be on my side. Why was he trying to bring me and Liddy closer? But it's not like we'd be interacting much anyway. Arguing seemed too troublesome, so I just nodded along to Quimby's words. A few days later, I got a message from Liddy. "Isn't Quimby too good for you? Should I take him off your hands?" I was chilled by her message. "What are you talking about?" I replied instinctively, and she called immediately. "Just what I said. It's unbelievable someone as dull as Linny will get married before me." Liddy insulted me over the phone and laughed. "He's high-earning and well-educated. Why not hand him over to me? We're twins. We've always shared everything." "Don't say stupid things," I yelled back at Liddy. I couldn't stand Quimby being treated like an object, nor the notion that we had always shared everything. That's ridiculous. I was always just someone for Liddy to dump the things she didn't want on. That night, I told Quimby about this, warning him to be careful around Liddy. But Quimby seemed to take it lightly, laughing off my words. "It's nice to be liked that much. Don't worry, Liddy's not serious." "It's not funny. You don't know what Liddy might do." "Do you doubt my feelings?" "It's okay because I said it's okay." Despite him being such a wonderful person, I felt like Quimby had changed after meeting Liddy. Quimby would affirm everything when it came to Liddy, just because she's my sister. Other than that, he was the same wonderful partner as always, but I was dissatisfied with how he changed whenever Liddy was involved. "Don't worry so much." But as Quimby said, if he himself didn't sway, there was nothing Liddy could do. Feeling unsettled by her words was proof I hadn't fully trusted Quimby. So, I was admonished. Indeed, he was right. I decided to trust Quimby and ignore Liddy's words. Even afterward, Liddy sent me spiteful messages, but I never replied. Fortunately, Liddy didn't interfere with us, and I prayed we could become wonderful sisters while leading a happy married life. Years went by. After I turned 40, my parents told me that Liddy had gotten married. By then, I had blocked her and wasn't in contact. Although we occasionally saw each other at our parents' home, Liddy would insult me. Being nearly 40 and still unmarried, Liddy had become resentful towards me, and it seemed she was avoiding me as well. I thought Liddy, being quite picky, wouldn't marry, but I was genuinely glad for her when I heard she had found someone. I realized how terrible I had been when Linny got married, only after I got married myself. Moreover, through my parents, Liddy apologized to me. After that, we started communicating again. Indeed, Liddy had changed, becoming much calmer than before. It was as if she had returned to the Liddy I once loved. I never thought the day would come when Liddy and I could laugh together again, so I was very happy. Liddy even introduced me to her husband. He was about 5 years our senior, named Gabriel. He seemed to care for Liddy deeply, which reassured me. Having both married, Liddy and I became closer. Our parents were very happy to see us getting along. I wanted to make up for the time we had spent apart. Then, a few years later, something happened. I became ill at work and had to leave early. I wanted to inform Quimby, but he was out on business, so I left a message with a colleague. I went straight home. Upon entering the house, I immediately sensed something was off. It felt like there was someone inside, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Could it be a burglar? That thought flashed through my mind as I quietly entered. Listening closely, I could hear noises and voices coming from the bedroom. As I stood silently in front of the bedroom, I recognized Quimby's voice coming from inside, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. The nature of his voice drained the blood from my face. It was unmistakably the sound of an intimate moment. The creaking of the bed confirmed my fears. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening, and my hands trembled. However, if Quimby was cheating, I had to catch him in the act. With that thought, I carefully opened the door with my smartphone in hand, ready to record. What I saw inside the bedroom was even more shocking. Liddy is really cute, isn't she? The voice became clearer as the door opened. Hearing Quimby say her name, I froze. Now that he mentioned it, the female's voice was indeed Liddy's. Quimby kept foolishly repeating Liddy's name. Trembling, I recorded the scene and quietly left. I sat in the dining area in shock for a while. I was supposed to be home early due to feeling unwell, but that shock made me forget my illness. Staring blankly at my phone, I just waited for this nightmare to end. Then, a few minutes later, the bedroom door opened. "I'll head back to work now, so lock up," said a voice. "Okay. It'd be nice if we could live together soon." Hearing this, I hurriedly stood up. Noticing the noise, Quimby and Liddy saw me in the hallway. "Linny, why are you here?" Quimby exclaimed, turning pale. "Why? This is my house, right? But why is Liddy here? Aren't you both supposed to be at work?" Liddy looked away for a moment, but then smirked defiantly. "Why do you think? You wanted it from my own mouth, didn't you?" "Liddy!" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy wouldn't be silenced. "I've always hated how you look down on me. Happiness and Quimby don't suit you. I'll take everything." With that, Liddy declared. I just smiled at her words. "Is that so? Then I'll give you Quimby." Liddy, but don't think you can take my happiness." Liddy seemed annoyed by my retort, glaring at me. To that, I continued, addressing her directly. "Yeah, I sent the video to Gabriel. Let's discuss this as a group of 4 sometime soon." Liddy's face turned pale instantly. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. If you want Quimby, Gabriel should know about this, shouldn't he?" "What have you done?" Liddy lunged at me. "Liddy, calm down!" "How can I calm down?" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy was beyond reason. Just then, the smartphone inside Liddy's bag rang. At that sound, Liddy froze in place. "Looks like Gabriel's calling, isn't it?" Liddy, pale-faced, hesitantly looked at her bag, but there was no sign of her answering the call. In the silent room, only the sound of the phone echoed. After a while, it stopped ringing, and then my phone rang. See? Since Liddy didn't answer, now he's calling me. "Linny, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive Liddy. Can you somehow cover for her with Gabriel? If not, Liddy will lose everything." Quimby started making statements as if to protect Liddy. Liddy, standing next to him, began to sob bitterly, as if she were the tragic heroine. What Quimby said made sense. Actually, Gabriel is not only Liddy's husband, but also the president of the company where she works. If Gabriel learns about Liddy's infidelity, divorce talks might start, and she might not be able to continue working at his company, especially now, during work hours. There's no room for sympathy, though it seems harsh. She did this knowing full well she could lose everything? I can't possibly cover for her. I said that. That's too harsh. Quimby, as usual, tried to defend Liddy. His words infuriated me, and I glared at Quimby. Worried about her? Thinking Liddy is the only one who's going to lose her family and job is a huge mistake. At my shout, Quimby flinched, then started sweating profusely. It was as if he suddenly came to his senses, starting to break out in a cold sweat. He must have understood the meaning of my words. Just so you know, I've also sent the video to the company's main email address, including your department and name. What have you done? By then, Gabriel's call had ended. Quimby and Liddy stood frozen, with a look of despair. After kicking them out, I called Gabriel. Sorry to disturb you at work. It's about the video, right? Yes. It involves Quimby, doesn't it? Yes. I replied to Gabriel's gentle voice. I'm sorry for asking this of you. He said that. Actually, Gabriel had consulted me because he felt something was off with Liddy. It might have been plausible for the old Liddy, but the current Liddy truly loved Gabriel. I didn't think she would cheat, and I had conveyed as much to Gabriel. But just in case, he had asked me to gather evidence if Liddy did something questionable. That's why I think I was able to film calmly. Please don't apologize. I'm glad I could capture evidence of Quimby's infidelity. If you hadn't asked me, I probably wouldn't have thought to do so calmly. I told Gabriel. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. It's shocking enough to discover an affair, let alone with one's own sister. I had every right to be angry. My sons will be home soon, so let's talk another time. I told Gabriel and hung up. Tears flowed endlessly, but for my sons and for my own future, I knew I had to be strong. That day, I went about my usual routines, and when the kids had settled down for the night, Quimby came home. Were you with Liddy? I asked him, and Quimby, clearly in a bad mood, snapped back at me. I got called into HR because of you. The decision on my punishment will come later. What are you going to do about this? The way Quimby turned the blame on me, making me out to be the villain despite his actions, made me almost laugh. Crying over such a man was a waste of time. There's nothing to be done. Do as you please. You understand the situation, right? If we divorce, I'm taking the kids. Still want a divorce? His attempt to use our sons as leverage was pathetic, and I told him so. What are you talking about? You think you'll get custody after likely losing your job? Divorce is a foregone conclusion. Stop being ridiculous. Quimby had nothing to say. Of course. Getting caught in adultery during work hours? Dismissal seemed inevitable. Was he still so clueless about the gravity of his actions? If that's the case, then he's incredibly foolish. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Wait a minute. Can't we consider starting over? Can't you forgive just one affair? Quimby, now taking a submissive stance, began apologizing to the assertive me. One time? I asked back. According to Gabriel, Liddy's behavior had been odd for several months. Given Gabriel's job involves mostly being out for sales, there's a good chance she might have been returning home like this. Just one? Quimby responded weakly to my question, his eyes darting around. From the lack of confidence in his answer, it was clear it wasn't just once. It felt ridiculous to pursue it any further, so I dropped the subject. The next day, I told my sons about Quimby's infidelity. They are in 6th grade now, old enough to understand that hurting and betraying others is wrong. I apologized for having such a conversation at this sensitive time in their lives, and they said they wanted to talk it over alone and went to their room. After just a few minutes, they came out with their bags packed and said, "We're on your side, Mom." I couldn't help but cry. The boys laughed and comforted me as I apologized again. Then we went back to my parents' house. My parents were speechless when they heard about Liddy and Quimby's actions. Despite being happy that we had become close as sisters again, I felt sorry, but Mom apologized to me, crying. Liddy hasn't changed after all. I'm sorry for always making you endure her. Cut ties with both Liddy and Quimby. We will keep our distance from Liddy to the bare minimum, Dad said, and I felt relieved. From that day, I started commuting to work from my parents' home. Quimby, perhaps on suspension, didn't come to the office but called me multiple times instead. Ignoring him as I didn't have time to deal with it, he began to send messages day and night. I love you, Linny. Let's live happily as a family of 4 again. I was insane. I was just deceived by that woman. I don't know how to live without you, Linny. Perhaps these were what you'd call Romeo emails. I was almost fooled for a moment, but thanks to my sons laughing uproariously at those messages, I realized how ridiculous they were. However, I couldn't ignore him forever. Eventually, I had to meet him to sign the divorce papers. I made plans to meet Quimby at a cafe on my day off. Choosing to meet at a cafe instead of going home was Gabriel's advice. He said that being in a public place would help keep the conversation calm. When Gabriel and Liddy arrived at the cafe together, Liddy had become so thin in just a few days. She looked like a different person. She must have fallen out of favor with Gabriel. Serves her right. Now, both Liddy and Quimby, please sign the divorce papers. It seemed Liddy was also reluctant to divorce. To the two hesitating to sign, Quimby said, It's a misunderstanding, Gabriel. It's your choice to divorce, but we won't. Are you still saying that? My sons and I no longer consider you family, I retorted. I addressed Quimby's desperate attempts. Gabriel sighed deeply and said, You could go to court, but it's clear you'll lose, considering the alimony and legal fees for the divorce trial. Can you afford it? Alimony for the divorce trial? Of course. You both betrayed your families. Liddy to me and Linny. Quimby, you'll have to pay us a proper settlement in the divorce trial. Liddy started trembling silently. Her silence and weight loss now made sense. What am I supposed to do? I might be fired. How can I pay? Quimby began to argue, pale-faced. You did this to yourself. Besides, you owe child support for both kids. Right, Liddy? At my words, Liddy flinched. You wanted to live together, right? You're welcome to have the house. Ha! I laughed loudly. And don't forget the mortgage payments! Quimby was taken aback, probably having forgotten about the mortgage. Both sat sweating, pale, and silent in front of the divorce papers. Later, Gabriel introduced me to a lawyer, and I managed to claim alimony and legal fees, and finalized the divorce. Quimby, who had resisted divorce so much, proposed to Liddy immediately after our divorce was finalized. I knew he had liked Liddy from the start. When did their affair turn serious? Hearing this, I felt nothing but disdain. Meanwhile, Liddy, who had genuinely loved Gabriel, was abandoned, and eventually lost her job too. Why did she end up with Quimby, despite loving Gabriel so much? Remaining puzzled, I asked Gabriel about it. He hesitated before revealing. Actually, she started complaining about you a few months ago. Really? Complaining about how you, who were useless, got married and even have kids? It's extravagant, he explained. Could it really be because of that? I wondered. But considering Liddy's personality, it wasn't impossible. Yet, the thought that she went to such lengths just to set me up was horrifying. It was because I thought you might be in danger that I consulted Linny, but I never imagined it would lead to this with Quimby. I'm truly sorry, Gabriel said apologetically. It's okay, it's over now. And Quimby is to blame for taking up Liddy's invitation as well. That concluded our conversation. Gabriel and I agreed to keep in touch for updates on the divorce compensation and legal consultations. According to him, the two burdened with a substantial amount of divorce compensation ended up marrying and living together. Liddy was abandoned by her parents and had nowhere else to go. It seemed she reluctantly accepted Quimby's proposal because she had no family left. From what the lawyer told me, Liddy couldn't accept that she ended up divorcing Gabriel and marrying Quimby, whom she didn't love, because of me. The lawyer mentioned getting hurled with abusive language every time he called her. While I felt sorry for the lawyer, he continued to support me firmly, perhaps because of Gabriel's presence, and I couldn't be more grateful. For a while, we'll still have to make calls to demand the divorce compensation, and it seems I'll continue to rely on their support. 5 years passed. The divorce compensation and child support were being paid on time, and my emotional wounds had largely healed. One day, after a long period of calm, the lawyer contacted me. Liddy says she has something to talk to you about. I refused. Knowing her, it would likely end up with her using me as a verbal punching bag for stress relief. I decided never to trust or forgive Liddy again, and asked the lawyer to convey my refusal. However, Liddy insisted it was urgent, and Quimby also requested a meeting on her behalf. Given their persistence, I reluctantly agreed. However, lacking the courage to meet them alone, I contacted Gabriel, feeling somewhat guilty for doing so after such a long time. He gladly agreed to accompany me, and so I met with them after a long while. Quimby and Liddy were sitting at the cafe with a solemn demeanor. When Liddy saw my face, she looked slightly relieved. "What's this about? Why did you call me here?" I asked, and Liddy said, "Actually, I've developed renal failure and need to undergo dialysis." I was taken aback. "It's your fault. No, both of your faults, that Liddy ended up like this. She couldn't sleep without drinking alcohol, and yet because of the divorce settlement payments, she had to work. Your actions have destroyed her health." Quimby angrily blamed us, but I thought it was their own doing. Gabriel seemed to agree, as he sighed and looked exasperated. "So what? I'm not reducing or refunding the divorce settlement. Be thankful I agreed to installments." I stood firm, and Liddy, crying, lowered her head. "I'll pay the divorce settlement. Please, I'm begging you. Give me a kidney." "What?" I exclaimed loudly at her outrageous request. "What are you talking about? There's no way I give it to you." When I refused, Quimby said, "You were born with a twin with Liddy for this reason. You have a duty to help her." "What are you talking about? Who has been pushing all the unpleasant things onto me? Did Liddy ever help me once in such situations?" "Don't talk about trivial matters. Liddy's life is at stake here," Quimby angrily retorted. Liddy began to cry and plead, apologizing. Quimby insulted me as heartless, pressuring me for the transplant as if threatening. At that moment, feeling as though I was being blamed, Gabriel spoke up. "If she needs dialysis, then undergo dialysis. Do you understand how tough dialysis is? And do you understand how difficult a transplant is? Why should she risk her life for Liddy?" Their words left them speechless. I felt relieved with Gabriel's support and caught my breath. "Moreover, Liddy, you've repeatedly called Linny useless. Isn't it too convenient to ask for help only when you're in trouble?" "But that's..." "Liddy, you've destroyed Linny's happy life. Linny has no obligation to save your life." Liddy broke down crying, and Quimby was at a loss for words. Both of them must have thought that I would surely give them a kidney. If I had been alone, I might have been persuaded. Once again, Gabriel saved me. "Take care then. Oh, and don't forget the transfer for this month's payment." With that, I got up and left. Whether I'm called heartless or a devil, I cannot forgive them both. I don't know what kind of life they will lead from now on, but I hope they never forget what they did and reflect on it. It seems Quimby and Liddy were both working part-time to make ends meet, but now that Liddy can no longer work properly, their financial situation is dire. But that's their karma. Everything is the result of their actions. Their atonement won't end until they've paid the compensation ordered in the divorce settlement. I continue to live happily with my parents and sons. My parents no longer even mention Liddy's name. However, it seems they are happy to see the twins getting along well. It's comforting to see a bond between my sons that Liddy and I never had. I continue to keep in touch with Gabriel frequently. He's a genuinely good person, always thoughtful and considerate. It appears he has developed feelings for me, but I'm not ready to reciprocate them at this time. I don't want to cause any more upset for my sons. But in a few years, when they come of age, I hope to have the chance to think about my own happiness again.
Sorry to always be a bother. Thanks again for this time. Ava said this with a smile, seemingly without any guilt for making us pay. She just hitches a ride on our trips as usual, thinking of my husband James as nothing more than a walking wallet. I let out another sigh, lost count of how many it's been. By the way, Ava's parents are coming this time too. This sudden change of plans caught me off guard. Of course, Ava has no intention of paying for her parents either. James, too, won't say a word about paying in front of Ava, just pretending to be generous. I knew he'd come back to me later, demanding, "You pay half." Surprised by this unexpected news, I secretly smirked, seeing it as a chance for revenge. Watching James get all excited, I chuckled to myself. Yeah, sure, it's fine. After all, this is the last time. Last time? I nodded with a big smile. The two of them looked surprised for a moment, but then burst into laughter, thinking it was just a joke. They seemed to think my words were just a joke, laughing it off and resuming their conversation. Watching the two of them get carried away, I didn't bother to respond. I was biding my time, caressing the tool I had hidden in my bag, eagerly awaiting the moment for my revenge. I'm Camilla, turning 63 this year. My husband and I, we've always loved traveling. We used to arrange trips several times a year around our work. Even after having kids and retiring, this didn't change. I thought we'd continue enjoying our hobby, but then things changed when Ava, the wife of our eldest son William, came into our lives. After William got married, Ava started visiting us often. William, busy with work, was relieved to know Ava was at her parents' home, so I didn't say anything. We were happy, a woman Ava's age, almost like a daughter to us, coming to visit. But I started feeling uncomfortable with my husband James's attitude towards Ava. "Thanks for dinner, as always." "It's nothing. I enjoy cooking when you're here." "That's right. Cooking's about the only hobby Camilla has. She's really happy when you visit." James sometimes put me down when talking with Ava. Comparing me and Ava with a mother-daughter age gap, he'd say things like, "Ava has such beautiful skin," or "Camilla should learn from Ava's high sense of beauty." Sure, Ava always comes over looking nice with her hair and dress, but being compared to someone a generation apart is troubling for both me and Ava. I'd reprimand James when he got carried away with his drinks, saying all these nice things. "Hey, can you stop? You're making Ava uncomfortable." "What's wrong? Can't I say the truth? Are you jealous of Ava's beauty?" "Of course not. What are you talking about?" "Then don't complain. Ava, sorry about this. Camilla, unlike you, is getting on in years and tends to get angry easily." James said this with a laugh, unrepentant as ever, and I sighed. Maybe because we never had a daughter, James was overjoyed when our son brought home someone as charming as Ava. But lately, James' behavior seems too much. He's not just mocking me, he pays excessive attention to Ava. I thought it was a joke at first, but I can't forget what James blurted out in his excitement. "James, you're always so kind to me. I'm really grateful." "Right? I bet I'm a better man than William, huh?" "What are you saying?" "William has always been soft. I can protect Ava." James was practically telling Ava that he's a better man than William. The fact that James would say such things to Ava, his son's wife, filled me with disgust. By the way, you two travel a lot, right? William told me. Yes, it's been our hobby for years. Lucky. William's too busy with work to travel anymore. Ava said this with a slight sadness in her smile, looking at James. I could easily guess James's next words, feeling a chill at Ava's anticipatory expression. Well, how about you join us on our next trip? Really? I feel bad, though. James's face lit up, happily inviting Ava. James seemed to have no intention of considering my opinion from the start. Ava, saying, I feel bad, showed no signs of reluctance. She looked at me with her hands on her cheeks. But I don't have money to spare. Don't worry. We invited you. We'll pay, right? Well, James eagerly sought my agreement, and Ava, hugging James in triumph, thanked him cheerfully. Her triumphant look might have been my imagination, but she definitely squinted at me with a sly smile. We're planning to leave next month, so get ready. Okay, I understand. Thank you. I could only watch the two of them excitedly ignoring me with a cold gaze. What about the hotel? We haven't booked for Ava. We'll just have to do it now. Take care of it, will you? Why should I handle it when you happily invited her? Camilla, why are you so cold when Ava's willing to come? After Ava left, I told James we only booked for 2. He responded as if I was being unreasonable. He insisted I be nice to Ava but wouldn't make hotel reservations or buy theater tickets himself. He even hesitated to cover the costs he boasted about. His attitude frustrated me, especially when he joked, Ava can even sleep in my room if necessary. This discomfort continued throughout the trip. James spent the entire trip pleasing Ava. If Ava said, I'm not interested in the theater, he'd waste our carefully prepared tickets and change plans. He wooed her without reproach, leaving me disheartened. Hey, Ava, I hate to say it, but it's troubling when our plans get disrupted. I'm sorry. I got carried away because James is so kind. It's okay. I'm happier when you rely on me. No matter what I said, Ava would look at James and he'd end up scolding me instead. Ava knew James was on her side, often making provocative statements, and James would always retort, What's wrong with doting on my son's wife? I'm sorry, I'm always having fun at your expense. I'm just a nuisance, aren't I? Not at all. I'm really enjoying myself with you here. Camilla's the one who's always complaining, more of a nuisance. Are you serious? Emboldened, Ava started timing her visits to our home, joining our trips as if it were a given. Perhaps James had been inviting her in advance for these trips, yet he never told me. Despite this, I was mostly left to handle the travel expenses caused by Ava. During the trips, Ava never attempted to pay, always leaving it to James. She didn't even bother to bring her wallet. This is cute. I'd like it as a souvenir. Sure, I'll buy it for you. Really? Thank you. James's eagerness to please Ava only led to more extra payments. And later, James would grudgingly hand over money, claiming, I'm just responding to Ava's requests. What should have been enjoyable trips became nothing but an unnecessary expense, and my frustration grew. Repeated trips like these were grating on my nerves. Talking to them didn't help, so I decided to speak directly to William about Ava. However, the response I got from William was worse than I could have imagined. Hey, William, Ava's always tagging along on our trips. Can something be done about it? Well, I heard Dad happily invites her. They make decisions without consulting me, and she doesn't pay. Wait, what? That's odd. I heard she pays her own way. It seems William had been misled by Ava. He believed Ava was paying her own way on trips because James forcefully invited her. Of course, I hadn't received a dime from Ava, and knowing James, he wouldn't have taken money from her either. Yet William seemed to think I was making up stories to harass Ava. That's not a joke. If you think that, she doesn't need to come anymore. Ava's trying to get along with you and Dad. There's no need to talk like that. How can I get along with someone who makes up lies and plays the victim? I tried explaining the truth to William, but I had no proof that Ava wasn't paying for the trips. William seemed torn about who to believe. Later, he talked to Ava again, who insisted, "I've been paying my share." In fact, she tearfully told William, "Camilla's falsely accusing me of not paying even though I do. She hates me." Moved by her tears, William seemed to side with Ava, sighing over the phone. Frustrated with William's doubts, I felt at a loss. Ava never even opens her wallet when she comes on trips. She says she has no disposable income since she's not working, but she says she's paying. If that's true, then she's using your earnings for the trips, right? If you really believe she's paying, calculate exactly how much she's contributed. In a situation with no allies, I rebuked William harshly. I was at my limit with Ava's manipulative behavior and James's complacency in paying for her. I decided to take revenge, gathering information to convince William. On the next trip, Ava joined us in her usual manner. Her small, high-brand bag seemed to hold only her mobile phone, certainly no wallet. "Sorry to be a bother. Thanks again for this time." Ava said this with a smile, seemingly guilt-free about making us pay. She casually got into the passenger seat of James's car and gave him a friendly smile. Watching Ava, James smiled back. Seeing them, I sighed again. Normally, I would have just endured it for my own peace, but not this time. Clearing my throat in the back seat, I glared at the two, planning to plunge them into hell. "James, about today's trip. How about here? I've always wanted to go." "Sure, I'll take you wherever you want." "I'm so happy. Thank you." Ava, who hadn't brought a penny, seemed well prepared with places she wanted to go, showing James on her mobile phone, completely disregarding the original plan. Ignoring the usual, I checked my preparations for the revenge. Then James, as if remembering, turned and dropped a bombshell. "Right, Ava's parents are coming too." "What?" "I told my parents about our trips, and they got jealous. So I thought, why not invite Ava's parents too? I'll pay for everything so Ava doesn't have to worry." James conveyed this with a smile to Ava, glancing at me with a side eye. Shocked by the sudden change of plans, I was taken aback. Naturally, Ava wouldn't intend to pay for her parents, and James wouldn't dare suggest it in front of her, acting all generous. I was sure that once we got back, James would again tell me, "You pay half." Stunned and irritated by this unexpected news, I smirked, sensing my chance for revenge. "Well, that's convenient." Smiling, I said that, and James looked at me with a nasty grin. Right. He resumed driving in high spirits, even starting to hum. Maybe he misunderstood that his wife's approving meant he could impress Ava's parents. Or perhaps he thought I'd generously pay, having agreed so easily. Watching his buoyant demeanor, I chuckled to myself. "Thank you, Camilla." "It's okay. This is the last time." "The last time?" I nodded with a full smile. The two looked surprised at me for a moment, but soon laughed, thinking it was just a joke. They didn't take my words seriously. "Ava is our dear son's wife, after all. We'll keep traveling together, right?" "Of course. So I'm counting on you in the future, Camilla." I kept smiling but didn't respond to the two of them, getting carried away. Knowing the unexpected events James hadn't told me about, it was all bearable thinking these two would soon see hell. In the evening, we arrived at the hotel and met Ava's parents. Then we were shown to our rooms. As usual, Ava and James said they would rest in their respective rooms. Of course, they were in separate rooms, but I knew exactly what they were up to when they said this. So I intentionally told them, "I think I'll have a drink with Ava's parents." "Sounds good. Have fun." I deliberately left them alone, and as they said, "Have fun," Ava waved at me with a smile. Her attitude seemed to imply that it was more convenient for me not to be there, which confirmed my suspicions. Anticipating the need to leave evidence, I approached Ava's parents. "May I show you something?" They looked puzzled, so I quietly turned on my mobile phone and showed them a video. "Nice room. Your room looks great too." "Really? Then you can come to my room." What I started showing them was a video from a camera I had just set up in the room. It was in the room where James and I were staying, and Ava appeared as if it was natural. Ava's parents watched, puzzled by their familiar behavior. I always arranged the hotel and trips for you. We could even travel just the two of us, without Camilla. That's too bad for Camilla. But Camilla's really angry that I don't pay. Don't worry about it, Ava. I'll talk sternly to Camilla. The screen continuously showed Ava flirting with James and him being visibly pleased by it. Their interaction, which didn't seem fitting for a conversation between a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law, grew more animated and seemed to mock me. Seeing her own daughter speak with such terrible insults about me, Penelope, Ava's mom, looked at me with a pale face. What in the world? What is Ava doing? This video is from a camera in my and my husband's room. It seems Ava is talking with my husband right now. This trip was supposed to be Ava expressing her gratitude to us. Oh, was it? I only learned today that you and your husband were coming. They seem to have decided everything on their own. I candidly told them everything about the past trips. I mentioned that Ava had not contributed any money, James's attitude, and how they both disregarded me. As I explained, Ava and James, captured on camera, seemed to be confessing. Their expressions changed rapidly, turning red and then pale as they watched the video. Throughout, I silently recorded James' inappropriate words, which didn't seem fitting for a conversation with his son's wife. Our daughter, I don't know how to apologize. I appreciate your understanding. I plan to cut ties with James and Ava after this. Feeling it was cruel to torment them further, I decided it was time to reveal the truth and headed to the room. Opening the door, James exclaimed, "Camilla, what's with the sudden entrance? What, is it a problem if I return to my own room?" "I didn't say that, but don't just open the door like that. It's startling." "Oh, sorry, I thought you had something to hide and were startled." Saying this, I replayed the video in front of them. Noticing Ava's parents behind me, their behavior became suspicious. "Did you want to travel alone? Were my presence and Ava's parents a bother?" "Well, that's... Ava's parents told me if you invite them on a trip to express gratitude, shouldn't you pay yourself?" "What? No, that's not it. James said he'd pay for me." Ava desperately defended herself, and James spouted nonsensical outrage for setting up the camera. Seeing them unable to apologize even now, I felt my heart growing colder. Is this conversation true? William? At that moment, our eldest son, William, who was supposed to be away on a business trip, appeared unexpectedly. Ava turned pale with surprise at this unexpected guest. Of course, I had called William beforehand, preparing for this moment. Sensing something was wrong with the inconsistent travel expenses in the household accounts, William was no longer in Ava's corner. "Ava, were you lying?" "No, James said he would take care of the expenses. I just got a little carried away, believe me." "Oh, really? James, you made me pay all this time saying Ava didn't have any money." I played another video on my mobile phone at full volume. It showed a pathetic conversation where James grudgingly paid for the trip. "Poor Ava, so I'll pay for her." And other nonsensical excuses from James filled the room. "This man is broke. He made me pay for everything." "How awful! I thought you had money, so I indulged a bit." Ava's true nature burst out as she listened to James' shameful words. Penelope, who had been silently listening, sharply rebuked a sheepish James and an argumentative Ava. "Who's the worst here? I'm ashamed to be her mother." Penelope scolded Ava, her face turning red with anger. The intensity of her expression left William and me speechless. "Ava is no longer my daughter. I should never have believed she was giving a trip as a present." "I didn't mean it like that. This is terrible." Overwhelmed, Penelope's voice echoed across the floor. James then quietly approached me, saying, "I was wrong to try to impress my son's wife." James finally offered an apology in a low voice, but his attitude, as if expecting forgiveness just because he apologized, pushed me to my breaking point. "I told you this trip was the last. I don't need a husband who spoils his son's wife too much." "Why? I'm apologizing." Do you think an apology is enough? I'm utterly disappointed." With that, I handed him the completed divorce papers. Realizing the irreversibility of his actions, James collapsed to his knees, head bowed. After the disastrous trip, William apologized, now knowing the truth. Ava, chastened by her parents, agreed to work and repay the money she owed for the trips. William wouldn't help her, and she started working part-time. I heard the high-brand bags and accessories James had lavished on Ava were also confiscated. James, for his part, was going around saying, "I got divorced because I was financially drained by Ava," which led to another uproar. Apparently, he demanded money back from Ava, causing a commotion. "Dad, was he always like that? I only remember him being good to you." "Was he? Now that I think about it, he always seemed like a careless person who just shared a hobby of traveling with me." I listened to William's complaints about James, disillusioned by his lack of fatherly dignity, but to me it was a story that only confirmed that divorcing was the right decision. James, having nearly drained our savings by excessively indulging Ava, and I finally divorced. I'm now living comfortably alone, having kicked him out. Free from the restraint I had endured till now, I'm planning travels to places I want to visit without anyone's interference.